People say that life-changing moments often come unexpectedly, but sometimes they are disguised as a family dinner, a dazzling feast, bursts of laughter, glasses clinking in celebration, all concealing a betrayal that had been planned long ago. And I, Chloe Reynolds, the person who had spent a decade building this empire, was the only one left in the dark. My father, Richard Reynolds, had always been a tough businessman. He built Reynolds Logistics from the ground up, working tirelessly through years of hardship. But it was me, no one else, who took it from a regional shipping company to a $120 million corporation. Expanding it nationwide, modernizing operations, and securing multi-million-dollar contracts, I sacrificed my youth, skipped vacations and put my personal relationships on hold, all to take this company to the top. And yet, on what seemed to be just another family gathering, my father spoke the words that made me an outsider. "Ethan will take over the company." The declaration struck me like a bolt of lightning in the middle of the dinner. I heard the congratulatory murmurs, the scattered applause, but everything around me suddenly blurred. I turned to my father, hoping I had misheard, but his face remained calm, his hand resting proudly on Ethan's shoulder. My younger brother. A knot tightened in my stomach. Ethan? The one who had never spent a serious day working in the company, who had burned through untold amounts of money on failed ventures, the one everyone, employees and business partners alike, knew was incompetent? And now, he was my replacement? I gripped my wine glass, my fingers tightening around the fragile stem. In that moment, I caught sight of my mother, sitting a few seats away, silently watching me. There was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but as always, she said nothing. She never did. I couldn't let them see me falter, not now. I took a deep breath, forced a perfect smile, and raised my glass. "Congratulations, Ethan." Ethan, always pretending to be humbly grateful, smiled at me. A smile I knew all too well. There was no gratitude in it, no appreciation. It was the smile of a man who had stumbled upon a gold mine without ever lifting a finger to dig, a man who had taken what was never his to begin with. The dinner carried on, conversations and laughter blending together, but I heard none of it. I could only see myself, 28 years old, freshly out of my MBA program, fighting every ounce of my father's skepticism, just to earn a place at the company. The girl who had once stood before the board of directors, proving every number, every strategy, just to be recognized. The girl who had once believed that if she worked hard enough, if she gave it her all, then one day her father would see her as the rightful heir. But what was the truth? No matter what I accomplished, no matter how high I elevated this company, in his eyes I was always temporary. No matter my achievements, the birthright would always go to his son. I had been cast aside from the very beginning. I set my glass down, my chest hollow with a cold emptiness. If this had been my father's plan all along, if he had made this decision years ago, then why had I wasted a decade of my life for this? No, I wouldn't be discarded so easily. I looked at Ethan, still basking in the congratulations, at my father, pleased with his decision, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, at the relatives and business partners who had once praised me but now turned to celebrate Ethan as if he had earned it. Did they think I would quietly step aside, accept this fate without a fight? They were wrong. They had no idea that I hadn't just spent 10 years building this company, I had spent 10 years ensuring I was worthy of my efforts. And tomorrow they would understand. I drove home in silence. Only the hum of the engine filled the confined space of my car, blending with the steady rhythm of my racing heart. The entire evening I had played my role flawlessly. A gracious sister congratulating her brother, a dutiful daughter not protesting, a composed businesswoman unfazed by change. But now, with no one watching, I felt the slow burning fury deep within me. Not the kind that erupted in anger, but the kind that was chilling, calm before the storm. Did they think I would simply accept this fate? They weren't mistaken. I stepped into my house, took off my coat, but didn't stop. I walked straight into my office, shut the door, and turned on the light. On my desk sat the laptop I had used for years to run the company. But tonight, it wouldn't be a tool for work. Tonight, it would be my weapon. I opened it and began digging into the documents I had long memorized but never had a reason to use. Until now. Contracts, shares, corporate bylaws. I had been working here since day one, back when the company struggled to land even the smallest contracts. I was the one who negotiated with investors, the one who single-handedly built the financial system that pulled the company back from the brink of bankruptcy. And I knew. My father never read the fine print. That was his biggest mistake. I opened a hidden folder on my computer, where I had stored every shareholder agreement over the years. One by one, my father had unknowingly handed me power he never realized he was giving away. The first time was in 2014, when the company needed urgent investment capital to expand operations. I invested my own money, securing 15% equity in return. The second time was in 2017, when the company faced a major lawsuit. To cover the costs, my father signed a collateral agreement, transferring another 10% of shares to me. And then in 2020, when the company was on the verge of being acquired by a larger competitor, I was the one who raised the defense fund, gaining another 10% equity in the process. I clicked on another file, the Internal Power Distribution Agreement. According to the corporate bylaws signed in 2016, any changes to the CEO position required approval from the majority shareholder. I double-checked the numbers. In total, I owned my original 35% stake, plus the 35% my father had unknowingly handed over through the years. I was the majority shareholder. Ethan thought he would walk into the executive office as the new CEO, that he would take control and run the company however he pleased. He had no idea that from the moment my father announced his decision, the battle had already begun. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., but I felt no exhaustion. Instead, an electrifying surge of determination coursed through me. I pulled open a drawer and retrieved another folder, a list of the board of directors. I knew not everyone on the board was loyal to me. Some had been with my father since the beginning, easily swayed by his words. But others cared about one thing only: profits. And I had delivered the highest profits in the company's history. I would give them a reason to stand with me. I scanned the list, marking those who could be persuaded and those I needed to approach first thing in the morning. I also reviewed every ongoing contract. Agreements that only I had the authority to approve. Ethan wouldn't be able to run this company without my support. And I wouldn't give it to him. I went over everything one last time. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the window, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Did they think I would simply accept this? They were wrong. My father might believe he had the final say. Ethan might believe the company was his. But they had overlooked one crucial fact. I wasn't just an employee of this company. I owned it. And they were about to find that out. I stepped into Reynolds Logistics headquarters at exactly 8:45 a.m., just as I had every day for the past 12 years. But today, the atmosphere had shifted. The vast hallway with its polished marble floors remained unchanged, but the way people looked at me wasn't the same. Some quickly turned away, pretending to focus on their screens. Others exchanged hushed whispers, hesitation clear in their expressions. News of the power shift had spread, and everyone was waiting to see how I would respond. I gave nothing away. I walked straight toward my office. My office, not Ethan's. The door closed behind me. I set my bag on the desk, sat down and powered on my computer. The critical files I had reviewed the night before remained on the screen, glowing in the early morning light. I took a deep breath, steadying my pulse. I was the one in control. And this morning, I would prove it. 9:00 a.m. A sharp, deliberate knock echoed through the room. I didn't need to guess. I knew exactly who was standing on the other side. The door swung open before I could respond. My father, Richard Reynolds, walked in, with Ethan right behind him. My father wore a dark gray suit, exuding confidence like a general who had just conquered an entire kingdom. Ethan, dressed in an expensive navy blue suit, wore a smug smile. He was ready to take over this company. But it didn't belong to him. Chloe, my father said, his voice calm, as if he were making the most natural decision in the world. Ethan will be taking over the company. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms and smiled slightly. Ethan, taking over the company? I repeated, feigning contemplation. Yes, I heard, but it seems like you forgot something important. Something you don't even realize. My father raised an eyebrow. What? Slowly, I reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. The large screen on the wall lit up, displaying a document with the title Shareholder Agreement and the signing date, July 10, 2016. My father's brows furrowed slightly. Ethan leaned forward, staring at the screen, but I knew he had no idea what he was looking at. I stood up, walked toward the screen, and ran my finger over a critical clause. All executive appointments including the CEO position must be approved by the majority shareholder. I turned back to them and spoke slowly, emphasizing each word. You cannot unilaterally hand over the company to Ethan without the approval of the majority shareholder. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. My father stiffened. Ethan, who had been grinning just seconds ago, now looked as if someone had punched him square in the face. Chloe, what are you saying? This isn't something you can decide on your own, my father said, his voice lowering, clearly trying to regain control. Isn't it? I tilted my head slightly, clasping my hands behind my back. Then let me clarify. I picked up another folder from my desk, walked over and placed it right in front of Ethan. This document shows my share ownership in the company. I pointed to the numbers. In total, I hold 55% of the shares. More than anyone, including you, Dad. My father stared at the document, his face paling. That's impossible. It's very possible, I cut in, and I have all the signed agreements and legal paperwork to prove it. I turned to Ethan, giving him a sharp, icy smile. You thought you could walk in here like a king and take everything, but there's just one problem. I let the words sink in. You don't have the right. Ethan snatched the folder angrily, flipping through the pages as if he could somehow find a mistake. But there was none. Chloe, what the hell are you doing? He snapped. Dad already made his decision, you can't just… You're wrong, I interrupted, my voice steady. I can. And I already have. My father narrowed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. You really want to do this? Turn against your own father and family? I took a deep breath, keeping my gaze unwavering. No, Dad. You forced me into this, when you chose to ignore everything I've done. Ethan gritted his teeth. So what do you want? To kick me out of the company? I looked him directly in the eyes. No. I'm giving you two choices. I held up one finger. 1, you stay on as an advisor with a generous salary. But you'll be working under me. I raised a second finger. 2, you leave. I'll buy out your shares at market value. You can take the money and… I try another failed venture. Who knows? Ethan's face flushed red with rage. You think you can just push me out like this? I shrugged. This isn't pushing you out. It's a fair deal. To protect my work and this company from falling into the hands of someone like you. Ethan clenched his jaw, then suddenly shoved the folder off the desk. This is insane, completely insane. He spun around, storming out of the office, slamming the door behind him. That left just me and my father. He stared at me for a long moment, silent. Finally, he let out a deep sigh, his voice filled with disappointment. You really have changed. You can't do this, Chloe. I held my gaze steady, unblinking. No, Dad. I'm just doing what needs to be done. My father didn't respond. He simply nodded, then turned and walked out of my office. As the door clicked shut, I let out a long breath. I had done it. But I knew this wasn't the end. I knew Ethan wouldn't walk away from a gold mine like this. And I knew my father, Richard Reynolds, wouldn't easily accept me running the company instead of Ethan. Nor would he accept losing to me. He was used to being in control, to having his decisions followed without question. The real battle was just beginning. Less than 24 hours after the confrontation in my office, I began to see the first signs of retaliation. That morning, as I walked into Reynolds Logistics, I could sense the shift in how people looked at me. Employees who once respected me now avoided my gaze. A few members of management hesitated before greeting me. It didn't take long to find out why. I opened my email inbox and saw a flood of newly published articles. Internal conflict at Reynolds Logistics, a father-daughter power struggle. Lily Reynolds, the ambitious daughter who pushed her father and brother out of their own company? I clicked on one. Every word had been carefully crafted to paint me as a greedy, ruthless woman, someone willing to betray her own father and brother for power. My father hadn't needed to say much. He had simply met with a few reporters, dropping vague yet suggestive statements like, "I only ever wanted the best for my family," or, "I never thought Chloe would take things this far." And that was all it took to set off a media storm. Ethan, of course, played his role as the victim to perfection. He appeared on a business news channel, his voice low, his expression pained. "I never thought Chloe would do this to our family. I just wanted to help grow our company into a global powerhouse. The company my father spent his life building. But she didn't want me there. She schemed to take control." He was even better at this than I expected. For a brief moment, it almost seemed like even he believed his own lies. I didn't respond immediately. I knew this game. My father had been in business his entire life. He understood the power of the media, and he knew that in a battle like this, perception and reputation mattered more than the truth. If I reacted too soon, I would look defensive, like someone scrambling to justify herself. So, I waited. I let them have their moment in the spotlight, let them say whatever they wanted. Let Ethan play the wounded brother, let my father play the disappointed patriarch. And when the time was right, I made my move. 3 days later, a new article appeared on the front page of the Wall Street Business Review. The truth about Reynolds Logistics finances under Richard Reynolds. I had spent the entire night before working with one of the best investigative journalists I knew. I gave them everything. Hidden debts, near bankruptcies caused by my father's poor decisions, shady transactions that I had spent years fixing. The article laid it all out. Under Richard Reynolds' leadership, the company faced the threat of bankruptcy at least 3 times. Financial mismanagement cost Reynolds Logistics millions, forcing Chloe Reynolds to step in, restructure the company, and invest her own money to keep it afloat. Ethan Reynolds has never held a significant executive position within the company, yet was being positioned to take over despite having no relevant experience. Chloe Reynolds did not steal the company, she saved it. Within hours, the entire narrative changed. The investors who had been waiting to see how things played out now had a reason to side with me. The board of directors, shaken by my father's rumors, was now starting to ask the real question. Did they really want to return to the chaos under Richard Reynolds? Ethan was silent. So was my father. They could no longer use the media as a weapon against me, because I had turned their own narrative against them. 2 days later, I received a call from my father. I stared at the phone screen, letting it ring 3 times before answering. "Dad," I said, my voice calm. "Chloe," my father sighed. "You didn't have to do this." I smirked. "Didn't have to do what? Expose the truth?" "You know how the media can twist things," he said. "We could have handled this internally." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Dad, I already gave you the chance to do that. You refused. And now, you want me to walk away?" My father was silent for a long moment before he finally spoke, his voice slower. "Do you even care about this family anymore?" I let out a quiet laugh. "You chose Ethan. Now, I'm only protecting what's mine." He sighed again, and I could hear the defeat in his voice. "I underestimated you," he admitted at last. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Yes," I said softly. "You shouldn't have." The call ended. I set my phone down on the desk and looked out the window. The battle wasn't over. But I had taken control of the game. They had tried to paint me as the betrayer. But now, everyone knew the truth. I wasn't the one who stole this company. I was the only one who truly deserved to own it. 2 weeks after the article exposing the truth, the storm finally settled. The whispers, the probing phone calls, the tense board meetings. All of it began to fade into the past. I had secured my position, and more importantly, I had proven I was worthy of it. But there was one thing I knew for sure. My father wouldn't just walk away and leave this company to me without a fight. So when I received another call from him, I wasn't surprised. I stood in the conference room on the top floor of Reynolds Logistics, overlooking the city skyline as my phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Dad. On the other end, my father took a deep breath. Chloe. We need to talk. I turned away from the window, leaning against the desk, my voice steady but devoid of the softness it once had. You've already said everything you needed to say to the media. What more do you want? My father was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more tired. I'm stepping back. I won't fight this anymore. I closed my eyes for a brief second, allowing myself a fleeting moment of relief. Good, I said simply. My father let out a dry chuckle through the phone. I knew you wouldn't try to stop me. I only hold on to what's worth keeping for the future of this company. A long pause stretched between us. After everything, I knew that no matter how skilled of a businessman my father was, he was still a man of the old world. A man who believed that power should be passed from father to son. And I, no matter how capable, had never been part of that inheritance plan. But now, he had no choice but to accept reality. I'll be selling you my remaining shares, he finally said. I'll keep a small stake as an investor, but I won't be involved anymore. I nodded silently, even though he couldn't see it. And Ethan? I asked. My father sighed. He'll have to accept it, he's leaving. I wasn't surprised. Ethan never had the strength to fight to the end. Once he saw he couldn't win, there was only one path left for him. To walk away with the money I had offered. Good, I repeated. My father fell silent for a long time, then finally, almost as a whisper, he said, I underestimated you. Something tightened in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't regret. Just emptiness. I had once longed to hear words of recognition from my father. I had once believed that if I worked hard enough, if I dedicated enough of myself, he would finally see me. But the truth was, he had never once acknowledged my efforts. And now, I no longer needed his validation. Good luck with whatever you do next, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He let out a small chuckle. Thank you. The call ended. And with that, an old chapter officially closed. After my father left, I finally did what I should have done long ago. I rebuilt the company in my own vision. I didn't just maintain what I had created, I transformed everything. I fired the senior executives who had remained loyal to my father and Ethan, replacing them with people who were truly capable. I modernized our management systems, investing in technologies my father once dismissed as unnecessary. Most importantly, I changed the corporate culture, turning the company from one shackled by outdated thinking into a dynamic, innovative, and stronger corporation than ever before. The result? Within a year, Reynolds Logistics surpassed a $200 million market valuation. For the first time in company history, we expanded internationally. I signed contracts with partners my father had once deemed out of reach. The company they had tried to take from me was now thriving more than ever, under my leadership. A year later, I saw my father for the first time since he left the company. We met in a quiet restaurant, no reporters, no cameras. He looked older, maybe from the stress of the past year, or maybe because he had finally realized his time had passed. I read about your partnership with the international shipping conglomerate, he said, swirling his glass of wine. It was a smart move. I smiled. I know. He shook his head slightly, a faint smirk on his lips. You don't need my approval anymore, do you? I met his gaze directly. No, Dad. I never really did. A silence passed between us. But this time, it wasn't hostile. No more battles, no more schemes. Just a father and a daughter, sitting across from each other after a long war. He raised his glass. Then, congratulations, Chloe. I lifted mine, clinking it gently against his. To new beginnings. Not to victory, but to reclaiming what was mine, and finally realizing I no longer needed anyone's recognition. 1 year after I took control of Reynolds Logistics, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the world moved forward as it always had. Freight trucks left the warehouses. Multi-million-dollar deals were signed. New employees walked into the building, hopeful for a future I had built. All of this was because of me. Reynolds Logistics was no longer a family business. It was a corporation. I had won. So why did I still feel an emptiness inside? That evening my phone buzzed with a message from my father. Dinner tomorrow? No explanation, no pressure, just a simple question. I stared at my phone screen for a long moment before finally replying. Okay. We met at an old-fashioned restaurant tucked away in a quiet street, far from the bright lights and endless business meetings. My father looked different. He was no longer the imposing man who carried the presence of a powerful executive. Something in his eyes had changed. A weariness, perhaps a quiet acceptance. I sat across from him, setting my phone on the table without saying a word. He watched me for a long time before finally speaking. You did well, Chloe. I raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't respond. He sighed, setting his wineglass down. I thought that if I gave the company to you, you would ruin everything. I was wrong. I let out a faint, humorless laugh. You never believed I could do it, did you? He didn't deny it. A silence stretched between us, not the tension of an ongoing battle, but a different kind of emptiness. The realization that no matter who won or lost, something had been permanently lost. My father slowly turned his wineglass in his hands, staring at the table as his voice lowered. I thought keeping the company and the family was the most important thing. He paused, then looked directly at me. But the family is gone. Something in my chest tightened for a brief second, but I didn't let it show. Family isn't a company, Dad, I said, my voice steady. But you never saw me as part of the family when it came to the business. I was just a placeholder. Until Ethan was ready. He didn't refute it. A part of me wanted him to apologize, to hear him say clearly that he had been wrong, that he regretted never seeing me as his rightful heir from the beginning. But that wasn't going to happen. He was Richard Reynolds. He never apologized. Instead, he spoke slowly. I know you don't need my approval anymore. I looked at him, and for the first time in a year, I realized it was true. I no longer needed my father's recognition. I no longer sought his validation. I had spent a decade trying to prove my worth to him. But in the end, the only person I ever needed to prove my worth to was myself. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. I built this company my way, Dad, I said calmly. I took it further than you ever imagined. And I'm not stopping. My father nodded slowly. I know. We said nothing more. There were no reconciliatory hugs, no miraculous reconnection like in fairy tales. We were simply two people who had stood on opposite sides for too long, and now, we both understood that the distance between us would never fully disappear. Finally, my father raised his glass. Congratulations, Chloe. This time, when I clinked my glass against his, I felt no anger, no disappointment. I only felt peace. That night, when I returned home, I stood by my office window, looking out at the glittering city lights. I had everything I had ever dreamed of: power, success, respect. But I had also lost things I once thought mattered: family, relationships, and perhaps a part of myself. I had no regrets. I knew that if I had to choose again, I would still walk this path. But I also understood one thing: victory always comes at a price. And I was willing to pay it. I lifted my glass of wine, staring at my reflection in the glass window. I was no longer Chloe Reynolds, the daughter seeking her father's approval. I was Chloe Reynolds, the woman who had proven her worth. And that, to me, was more than enough. Chloe Reynolds' story is not just about a battle for corporate control, it is a journey of self-worth in an environment filled with bias. It reflects a common reality: women in business are often underestimated and must fight twice as hard to be recognized. Chloe's success did not come from talent alone, but from her persistence, strategy, and the courage to stand against those who once dismissed her. This story serves as a reminder that true worth is not defined by others' validation, but by what we build for ourselves. What do you think about Chloe Reynolds' journey? Did she do the right thing by fighting for what was rightfully hers, or did she lose too much in the process? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life and family.